All right, good night. Good night. So, welcome to another week. Oshane Bryant Corna. This is supposed to be the fifth staging for 2026. And the focus for today is entrepreneurship equals no bank support, hard truth. If you have been following or keeping up with the videos I've been creating, uh, you would have more than likely been hearing a general theme, which is around business and starting a business. Now, the reality is that, it's about also sharing some hard truths in the context of starting a business venture from scratch. So, with my experience as a key pillar, the aim of this discussion is just to present to you some realities. In Jamaica's case, there is, as I would have seen, this push for entrepreneurship. There is this push for people to start their businesses. Basically, to talk about the whole context of you know growing business, formalizing business. You know, um, that is a very common theme as I come across it in Jamaica. And even as it become a case that we can see a wide range of digital usage via social media platforms, you will come across people who will say that they are the CEO, or they are the owner of a specific business. The reality is that owning a business or starting a business from scratch is very hard. That is where I want to start with first. Second thing is that you have to now keep in mind that the glitz and the glamour of creating a business venture is one where there will be very little to to the best of my knowledge in Jamaica's context. No form of access to you to be able to, acquire loans, or acquire that financial start. Yet still, the push exists whereby if you talk about owning a business or moving forward with a business, that you should have a bank account. So the frame of this all is to highlight, to present some insight into the realities that you more likely will face where it comes to banks, or where it comes to financial institutions getting access to support. you know um, the reality is, if we're going to talk about starting a business venture from the ground up, getting that kind of a support is relatively not available. So, with that being said, I just want to highlight a couple key points here, that entrepreneurship is different than you being a business owner. And this is where now I'm going to start with a discussion. So, using Google search as a key source. Entrepreneur, an individual who identifies a business opportunity, initiates a venture, and assumes the associated financial risk and rewards to bring a new product or service to market. Characterized by innovation, strategic risk taking, and organizing resources to create value and foster economic growth. So, key point here is, being an entrepreneur requires risk. You taking a significant amount of risk, investing your own time, money, and effort, facing high levels of uncertainty. All right, so just want to highlight that. And another point that I want to highlight, yeah, man, bless up, bless up. Another point I want to highlight, as it highlights in the Google search, common traits of successful entrepreneurs: resilience and adaptability, ability to navigate challenges and pivot when necessary, passion and drive, high levels of optimism and self reliance, and leadership, capability to organize resources and people. Now, in terms of entrepreneurship, so again, that's just me defining an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship, the process of identifying a market need and designing, launching, and managing a new business venture to meet that market need. It often involves significant risk taking, and innovation to generate profit or social value. It drives economic growth by creating jobs, fostering competition, and introducing new products. Key characteristics of entrepreneurship include resilience, vision, and creativity. Now, business owner versus entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs and business owners differ primarily in risk tolerance, innovation, and growth goals. Entrepreneur create, innovate, and take high risk to disrupt markets for rapid growth. Conversely, business owners often manage stabler, proven models. Let me mention it again. Business owners often manage stabler, proven models, focusing on profitability and sustainability. So, key difference between being an entrepreneur and business owner. Entrepreneur, you talk about creating something from scratch, taking significant risk. There is nothing that is there in terms of the business, whereas the business owner would more than likely take over a successful venture. So in so doing, it is much more stable. There would have already been the process in place where that business is now alive, and basically there is some form of stability. Stability in terms of finances, stability in terms of market share or clientele, stability in terms of products. The key highlight with all of this is that when you're talking about being an entrepreneur, it's about you basically starting something from the ground up, and you basically taking significant risk. Now, with this being said, it ties back into what it is I highlight in terms of the topic of this discussion, which is entrepreneurship equals basically no bank support. And I'm speaking about it within the context of you starting your venture. Because if it's a case that you're starting your venture within the context of you getting bank support, whether it be for you to get open your bank account or to get a loan, it is hard for you to think about getting that if your venture has not yet established a degree of a footing. But it is key that that is highlighted because there is a great misconception that exists. Many people show out in the marketplace talking about entrepreneurship or thrusting self into entrepreneurship. And if it's a case that you're really and truly talking about starting something from the ground up, you have to acknowledge that you, first of all, getting access to the support to have finances or capital to be injected into your business, or even to have a business account, you're not gonna get that in your first year. So you then now have to understand that when you're talking about entrepreneurship from the ground up, especially in the context of Jamaica, and I can more than likely assume in other Caribbean countries, you have to accept the reality that access to capital, access to the requirements for you to be able to open a business account in the context of you just being able to do business, it's going to be very, very hard in the get-go. Right? So with this being said, this is a hard truth, and this is just the reality that I want to highlight. If you know are saying that you intend to take risk, then the parameters on which I want to also shift this discussion is on the grounds of you recognizing that when you talk about taking some significant risk in creating an entity, the entity is not guaranteed to make it. So in that respect, it is a case where you lack capital, or you may not necessarily be able to grasp the access to capital. And in so doing, you at the same time to have to deal with all the risks that come with it. It basically is a case where you have to also be the one to really be the engine behind it. That is very hard. And if you are not willing to take on 1 year of committing self to the grind of being an entrepreneur, then you have to recognize that it is really not something that you should just jump into. Because I would not recommend people basically go into entrepreneurship if it's a case where it can be avoided, or if it's a case where you do not have a safety net. So, using my experience as an example, I did not have a safety net. I did not have capital to deal with. I did not have that cushion to deal with, right? So, in so doing, my reality was very, very harsh. My reality would have been a reality where I would have had to be basically residing on the UA campus, training people, but still residing on the UA campus at night time, doing this average 6, 7 days a week, and basically just having to know that this is what I have to do to save funds so that I can be able to access the potential loans in the near future. This is not something that I will say everyone should just jump into, because the reality is that not all, I will say, aspiring entrepreneurs can access the capital via angel investors. Not all entrepreneurs can access capital from venture capitalists. If you're not aware, they are both similar, but it's basically talking about you having, other people come into your business venture to invest into your business, and they will do so once it's a case where you have, say, for example, a strong business plan, where your business plan would also highlight, say, for example, as an exit strategy, whereby if they are putting in their money into your entity, they can be assured that they can get their money back, right? That is something that is basically, that's basically something that, you as a person who is starting a business venture must make sure that you're grasping. You can't just say that you want to be an entrepreneur and you do not acknowledge that you need to first of all fully know that a business plan is something that you should have in order, so that at the very minimum, if you're going to go forward and to try and seek investors, you can be able to explain to them that this is the business, or this is the business idea, this is the need, or this is the market size, this is the go to market strategy, this is the capital required, this is the expectation in terms of profit or loss within a given time period. And based on that as well, this is a timeline that they can expect for him or her or they, in terms of investors, to get back their return on investment. That is something that is very important if you're talking about going into entrepreneurship. But as I've indicated, or as I've highlighted a while ago, if you're going to talk about going into entrepreneurship thinking that by doing so you will just jump off and get all the kind of access to capital as they are, that's a fallacy, a huge fallacy. So you should spend the bulk of your first year of entrepreneurship, first of all, testing, basically, trying to validate what it is that you are bringing to the market, why you're bringing it to the market, who is the market, how you're going to go forward into bringing it into the market. And at the same time, you also get feedback in terms of how is the market also gravitating towards what it is that you have to offer. All of this data gathering, intel gathering, is what you also have to take into consideration, that you don't necessarily have the stability of financial resources. Because when you're talking about testing in a first year of entrepreneurship, or as a young budding entrepreneur, you have to take the acknowledgement that you're more than likely not going to get enough money in to be able to pay your bills. You more than likely won't have enough money to be able to take care of everything that you need to take care of. So if that is your reality in that respect, it is going to become even harder for you to focus on still committing to the journey of being an entrepreneur, because of the fact that, again, there is no form of stability, there's no form of assurance in the journey. Now, in terms of the financial institutions, you going into entrepreneurship and um, having to face the reality that you may not necessarily get the support to access loans compared to, say, for example, employees or employers of larger organizations. The fact of the matter is, it's a business. That's one. Two, it's also about risk avoidance. In many instances, you have to think about in this context, you creating an entity that has not proven that it has a market, and it has not proven that it has longevity, is a risk for any financial institution in that respect. So when you're going to talk about trying to acquire a business loan, and you don't, say, for example, have audited financials over a 2 year period, as an example, then while it is harsh, it is still a realistic um, outcome, because the loan provider has to know that they can reclaim their funds at the end of the day. When you ever talk about being an entrepreneur and you're just going to sell them the vision alone will still not, you know, validate them being able to say yes, they can get the hard cash when they need the hard cash, or they can get to liquidate whatever kind of assets that you may need to have as collateral. I mean, especially for many people in Jamaica's context who may not have a starting collateral, these are hindrances, obviously, to really pursuing the entrepreneurship venture. Similarly speaking, it's also a deterrent that in the context of being able to grind it out in entrepreneurship, not being able to access certain capital is obviously going to pose a significant threat to the entity being able to live. um, as what matters in the market, as highlighted in many theories in terms of the business side of school, it will indicate that the length of time you spend in a market matters. So, you will see, say for example, many new entrants into a marketplace. They are the hot thing. Why? Because it's new, as an example. But then, no, after a year or two, they begin to fall off, and they begin to fall off because of many different factors. What matters obviously is your capacity to be able to capture a market and to hold that market, and to be able to even grow that market over a period of time. That is what matters, and obviously that takes time to do. But the thing about it all is that to get there, you need capital. And if it's a case that we're talking about acquiring capital at the onset, that's not something you're going to get. So what do you do? I mean, there is no one size fit all approach in terms of what to do. See? But I'm going to say it like this. You have to you look at your circumstance and look at it within the context of your environment and your reality. See? If I use my experience as an example, when it was a case that I was starting Oshane Bryant Fitness, Oshane Bryant Fitness started off as a sole proprietorship first. So in so doing, that basically was me having the business access funding, if you will, or get a actual account through my own personal account, that is. And as funds would have flown through that personal account, I would have funneled it into Australian Brand Fitness Limited once it became a limited liability. And that was the process for the first year, just transitioning funds to the best of my knowledge. As money came in, we just push it into Oshane Bryant Fitness. And by doing that over the period, that was my way of trying to at least justify that, the inflows and the outflows of OB Fitness was what they were. Having said that, this was the reality, that to actually start the process, I needed to have a bank account, and that bank account was through my personal name, not necessarily from me just opening the business in its own name, right? The key thing within Jamaica's, uh, I would say, corporate relative legal system, the sole proprietorship slash partnerships, those entities are tied to the person. So in so doing, those entities don't have to have a bank account for themselves. Once you open a limited liability, the limited liability must have a business account for itself. And in so doing, that is where obviously taxing or taxes on the part of the business must also be filed. So that key difference means therefore that obviously you have to now take the responsibility of the entity owner to make sure that for the now living organism of the limited liability, it has money coming into it. And once you're then in that grind of putting money into it, then you have to also acknowledge that once you become a limited liability, you have the responsibility of filing taxes for that entity every single year. I didn't have this planned out in this agenda, but I'm gonna mention it here. A thing that you have to acknowledge as well as an entrepreneur is that when you know create that living entity in you paying taxes for that living entity is different from you having to pay taxes for yourself. A two taxes you have to pay. See? And that is something that I don't think many people are aware of. That is a very hard truth. So you know have to take into consideration once you say you have become an entrepreneur that these are some serious costs you have to take on. You have to take on the cost of filing taxes for that company, separate and apart from filing taxes for yourself. And then no, you have to take into consideration that if you're going to consider to, I guess, access certain kind of loans, whether it be as the owner, the employer, or separate and apart from the business accessing certain loans, you then now have to go make sure say you have access to that chartered accountant to be able to say in written format that yes, your finances is what it should be or what it may be. All of them thing there requires you to obviously have those records in place. And that is a major hurdle that has to be overcome. That is something that I had to learn on the way. Zane. And obviously, it is also something that eats up cash flow, right? And you have to then now make sure that you are putting systems in place to be able to not necessarily go above what it is that you're supposed to be doing in terms of how much money you spend on a monthly basis. Zane, you see that? And not having the opportunity to access capital, again, in my view, yes, as a hard truth, is more than likely a reality why you see many entities start and many entities lock down within, like, say for example, in the first 5 years, because many entrepreneurs having to navigate so many turbid waters in being able to create the entity, find a market, make sure say money are coming, make sure say you deal with the proper accounting system. Then at the end of each year, have a file for both the entity and yourself. Even if you don't make the money for yourself, you still have to basically file whether or not it's a loss, yes or no. And that basically means you have to deal with cost. You have to spend already. Where if you don't have that money to deal with, how you gonna find it? That is something that you have to deal with. You have to find that way, right? And you can't really upset with the banks or upset with the entities who won't give you the loans, because at the end of the day, it don't make no sense them going to give you a loan if they don't know that your business can pay them back. Or rather, it don't make no sense them give you a loan if from your financials show that your entity is at a loss. That don't make no sense. So at the end of the day, you can't really vex with them. But you have to acknowledge and understand that this is what it is that comes with the journey. Navigating that is, it comes back down to resilience, as I've mentioned, yes. Vision, yes. Faith is something that has to also be a part of it. Trust in the process has to be something that you can say, you know what, you know that you basically have to go a bit hungry. You know that you basically have to struggle to probably pay a bill, or you probably have to miss some bills. You probably have to walk long journeys. You see, you probably have to just beat the one set of clothes where you have for a good long while. That is something you have to commit to, knowing that you have the faith that in a year or two, your situation will improve. But your situation will not improve just by the faith and you not putting in the work. The level of work where you have to put in is insurmountable. Zane, I can tell you that if you're gonna talk about being an entrepreneur and you think about a 9 to 5, do not do it. Do not think about saying, you know what, you're going to go into entrepreneurship. It's not going to work. 9 to 5 mentality, 9 to 5 in terms of hours is not going to cut it. So you have to know that once you say you're going to go into entrepreneurship and you work on this entity, first of all, working on it, working in it, you have to deal with that. You will hear people say, oh, yeah, you should not be working in your business. You should be working on your business. How many of them actually are people who really and truly would have grinded it out from the get-go. Because if they did, they would also highlight to you that it is somewhat an unavoidable circumstance to work in your business. If it's a case where you're talking about creating something from the ground up, are you one? You have to work in it. You cannot think about just working on it. So that was my reality. I basically would have had to be up from a 4 o'clock in the morning, go straight to 9 o'clock in the night. I saw me I beat it on the UA campus back in them days. That's how I was working it. And when I done that, me basically going to the bathroom around the gym so hold a bed, eat a nice little bit of cornbread and sausage, deal with that. That are nardos. Those are the people who know. Would I deal with a nice nardos? Go on and eat the gazebo. And before me shut my eye, I start think. And basically, would have shut me eye like around 1 o'clock. For then, don't make sure I wake up back 4 o'clock. And I saw me, I beat it 6, 7 days a week. I beat it hard because me, I say, you know what, this uncomfortability, yeah, when people saying to me that OB fitness now gonna make it, me I gonna prove everybody wrong. That was my intensity. That was my approach. And another thing that I'm gonna highlight is this. I'm gonna make it be known as well that this is something you have to acknowledge. You see, if you do not start from early, your business venture or you pursuing entrepreneurship, the longer you take to start, the harder it is. Because each passing year, you get older. Each passing year, inflation can rise. Each passing year, market can change. You see, worse like how we see how the digital economy is what it is. Worse like how you can see that they're pushing this whole AI and you see the agenda in which what it is, where you can see that different markets. Because listen, yeah, people, if you don't really know what is really taking place with AI and social media, globalization is still becoming compartmentalized. See? So, in so doing, from a digital point of view, what do I mean by this? Based on where you are located, you can have more opportunity for monetization versus someone else. Big up yourself, Nikasha. That's just the truth. Probably some people don't want to talk about it, but I have to make it known because why? You have many of the youngsters in Jamaica and in the Caribbean region who more than likely are looking to social media as an avenue to monetize, as an avenue to earn. And what they don't, many of them, they probably do find out, but what is not really also being expressed is that at the end of the day, based on the region in which we reside, say, being able to earn from the social media as it is becoming much more challenging because of the reality that the algorithms are more so being curtailed to those economies. As I would have said in a previous video, obviously those economies are much larger. So in that respect, it means therefore that the opportunity to earn or the opportunity to say, what you're going to use your social media to grow and scale is becoming more and more and more challenging. So with that being said and done now, you have to now acknowledge that even though social media should make it easier for you to access people who are in the States or people who are in UK as an example, unless your content is one that, let's just say for example, is relatable, is being engaged with in that context, then you should not expect that your reach will be the same in that respect compared to them in their region versus you. And in so doing, it basically means as well that in terms of you being able to, tap into certain kind of benefits that social media will drive at you, it's going to be much more harder. So entrepreneurship, even in the social media sphere, for those of us who reside in Caribbean, is much more challenging. TikTok shop is not available in the Caribbean. It's not available. They have a talk about certain kind of gifts and reels on Instagram. It's not available if you're in the Caribbean. You know what I mean? If you're going to talk about, what am I saying? Are you listening? Can you say specifically what am I saying? So if it's a case that you're not understanding, please clarify. If it's a case that you're not understanding my patois, my Jamaican patois, or if you're understanding it and you want clarity on a specific topic, please specify specifically. This is Jabarids. Yeah. Okay. You just joined. Okay. So I'm speaking on entrepreneurship and some hard truths of entrepreneurship. I am from Jamaica and I'm speaking in that context as well. So something that is relevant to individuals in Jamaica in the Caribbean region. Nekasha, do you think having had training in the military had a positive outcome or contribution? Yes, yes. At least for one, the exposure in the Jamaica Defense Force um, helped me to acknowledge that my drive and my journey is what it is today. Albeit it was a longer journey. Then, back then, when I decided that I was not going to venture into the Jamaica Defense Force, I would have heard utterances within the community that I was living in that I am worthless. I am basically throwing away a good opportunity. I'm going to keep it as real as it is. My vision and my direction is not such where I'm just going to be confined at the Up Park camp or going to be confined to what is a general, imagery of military in Jamaica. No. If you have not come across the content that I've pushed on OB Fitness via OB Fitness channels, let me tell you as it is. My background with the breadth of geology, with the access to military, obviously, intervention of martial arts, fitness. It's all encompassed around giving me that wider that scope to be able to empower people to lead a sustainable, healthier lifestyle. And doing so, it means therefore that I have to encapsulate all of these different segments. And that basically is my way of empowering people for the long term. Obviously, what it is I would have been exposed to in terms of the JDF, it does still reside in me today. Yes, but I will say also that I had these qualities from before. There's a saying, as they say it in entrepreneurship, some traits you have to be born with. I can say that in terms of my experience from younger days where people said that I will not come out to be anything, that is something that is a push for me. See? That's a push for me. Yeah, man, big up yourself from St. Anne. Jabari Edwards, big up. Yeah, man, I'm gonna tell you that's a push for me. See, people saying that I'm not gonna come out to be anything from back then, and or people having the impression that OB Fitness, because we didn't have a gym on the UA campus back then, that we were not going to be successful, and or the reality that me not necessarily pursuing or pushing certain kind of agendas in terms of social imagery or certain kind of affiliations, that at the end of the day that is just where it's going to stay. That was my drive as an entrepreneur to say, you know what, I'm gonna prove, I'm gonna show everybody the levels of OB Fitness. I'm gonna show no all that at the end of the day, OB Fitness is not confined to Jamaica alone. For one, I'm a person who's a geoman, and I'm not confined to one specific country. And in terms of what it is that I'm imparting, in terms of what it is that I'm doing, it's to empower people across the world, across nations. See, using this as I will do my voice and what it is I'm talking about, the content that I'm pushing out to basically evoke that kind of like that inherent fire within the person who is along that similar line of a journey. That same person who basically, or a similar person who basically leaving university, looking at what are the options that are available post university, seeing that there is no real options, or seeing that basically the people that are there is about kiss gluteals or to try to align so that you can be able to get by. That is not my way. I don't live that life. I keep my thing straight. I keep my thing real. And as an entrepreneur, it's not just about financial profitability for me. It's about the social impact. All right, about now where it comes to what it is I'm seeing through OB Fitness, being able to impart on the community and see where the community themselves are being able to do same. That is where I can say, yeah, man, the journey of entrepreneurship is really and truly a strong one. That's the value of it all. And that is what I am trying to push out in terms of these kind of life. So in going back to it, you wanting to be an entrepreneur, if that is you, you have to acknowledge that you have to go through it hard. And if you do not have it hard within you, you are likely to fail. You are likely to fail. If you make it through your first year, you're good. Just make it through your first year. But you have to know that once it comes to you taking on the journey of being an entrepreneur, 9 to 5 does not apply to you. If you have a family with you, you have to make it work. You have to find the time to deal with obviously your family obligations, plus deal with your entity organization or your entity obligations. If it's a case that you take on your schooling and you say, you know, you pursue entrepreneurship, you're more likely going to come across a clash. But if at that you say you do, you still have to know that if it means that you have to deal with your all-nighters then for school, at the same time you have to find a way to make something work for your entity, you have to find a way to make it work. The reality is it comes back down to you. And as I've stated before in a previous video, you basically just have to keep the time. You have to put in the time. Once you put in the time and you make it through the years, then you would notice that it's like a snowballing effect. But you have to start early, because the longer you take, worse if you have age on you, you do not have the benefit of time. Saying if it's a case that you're taking longer, then obviously speaking, you're talking about your functionality being much more in a decline. You're talking about more than likely you're having one and two little ailments to deal with. All of those things are going to make it harder for you to be able to stay the course of entrepreneurship. Now, as you get through that first year, or you make it through your fifth year, then obviously you have a better picture of where you stand with this entity. And if it's a case that you have been fully consistent with your financials, making sure that you are recording your inflows, your outflows, you are basically keeping track of everything relating to the entity, the marketing side, the sales side, the overall, if you have team, human resources side, even the legal side, because obviously whatever it is that the government puts in place in terms of their legislation. Let's just say, for example, we talk about minimum wage increasing, or we talk about a new entrant into a specific industry. Those are things that would more than likely interfere or benefit how you go about running your own entity if it moves from the baby stage and you're talking about growing it. So you have to make sure that you are fully aware of everything, you're fully abreast with everything, even though you more than likely would be a specialist in a particular area of entrepreneurship, or a specialist in a particular area of business, or a specialist in a particular area in terms of your technical scope. You still have to have that eye for everything, because basically everything relating to the environment can affect the longevity or whether or not your entity will live, yes or no. And these are all the additional things that these financial institutions will look at. But yeah, you just have to just know, man, it's all hard. Then um the thing to you have to pray is that in Jamaica's context, starting a business and talking about trying to get even access to NHT, nobody think about that, because at the end of the day, NHT look on contributions, they're going to look on a minimum of 1 year. So if you just start a thing, saying and you talk about NHT, saying you basically don't have any contributions to give for that first year. So again, like I said, the things where you have to acknowledge is that you are creating something from the ground up. You more than likely will not get access to those kind of capital or those kind of investment opportunities when you're at that ground stage. That is just how you have to just deal with it. That has to be a reality you have to deal with. Seeing um another thing that probably pops off the top of my head is the context of entrepreneurship. Is entrepreneurship a thing that only men can do in terms of starting something from the ground up and really and truly grinding it out? No, history is there whereby women would have done it just the same. So there is no bias. The only thing is just that obviously, whether or not you're a man or a woman, the traits will have to be there. You more than likely will have to have it within you to say, you have a never die spirit within you. You know what I mean? You have a never give up spirit within you. You have a spirit within you where even when it's a case that nobody can see what you're doing, even if it's a case where you're doing something and there is nobody at all that is there, you are capable of pressing on same way, knowing that the day I go forward, when everything will start falling in place. That is something that you can't get it at school. You can't, all right, boom, yeah, you're gonna get a degree and you get that. Or you can't go basically say, you're gonna go do this at work, yeah, and get this experience and get that. No, it has to be within you. And that is something that you not gonna really know unless you depend on the journey. And this is why training people for me, it falls in line because at the end of the day, you have to have the experience. You have to know what it is that you're doing. You have to be able to guide people, and to guide people, you have to be able to have been on the journey. And at the end of the day, that is what we notice is a higher value of OB fitness. That's why I can say this straight that in terms of OB fitness, Jamaica, I do not see any other entity doing what OB fitness is doing. None. And in that context, I'm afraid for that, OB fitness is a global brand. Straight. The way how me I talk about empowering people is beyond just about accessing a certain weight or accessing a certain body type, or not body type, but body fat percentage, or being able to acquire a certain kind of look. No, it's much more than that. It's basically trying to push people into being able to realize their fullest potential, which is where obviously Oshane and Bryant kind of comes in. But obviously, when we talk about day in, day out, when we hear people can say, "Boy, yeah, Oshane, yeah, help guide me into being able to, be elevated," that in of itself ties into everything. So when we sit down and look at it, yes, OB fitness, yes, in terms of geology, yes, in terms of self-defense training, everything in and of itself, telling the story and empowering people, that that vehicle, OB fitness, that prophecy, as it would have been, it's a blessing that it is here now. So may I empower everybody from you have the drive within you. And if you say you want to go for entrepreneurship, go for it. But make sure that you are prepared to put in 100% work, 100% work, more than what anybody else could think about, more than what you probably could even think about. And if you're up on the journey, dip on the journey. You can't dip on it one foot in, one foot out. Know that you have to go through enough hungry nights. Know that you have to get enough no's. Know that you basically gonna have enough people not being there. You're gonna be lonely, lonely as I tell you straight. But if you have your grind in there and you know that your vision is beyond just having money, you know that what it is that you're doing is obviously something that is for the greater good. And in addition to that, obviously, you know that things will fall in place because you trust the process, then entrepreneurship is for you. Otherwise, if it's a case that you don't want that kind of a risk, know that there are many businesses that you can more like tap into. Once it's a case that you follow all the guidelines of knowing that at the end of the day, you're supposed to be looking at the business based on the business plan, based on the past performance of the business, based on the direction of the business, based on the management team of the business, and you can then build your trust into the whole story and the direction of the business. Then yeah, you go on and you invest in businesses. But yeah, entrepreneurship not for everybody. You have to buck up on a whole heap of hardship in the beginning. No farmer capital, no access to loans. You have to find a way. That's the hard truth of entrepreneurship. So yeah, that's where I'm at today. Thank you very much for tuning in. Big up yourself, everybody who would have commented. Nakasha, uh, Jabari, Edwards. Yeah, I see. What is this? I can't say the name, but I see somebody say win, win, win. Yeah, man, enough respect, enough respect. Big up on yourself, big up on yourself, big up on yourself. You know, this 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 episode too supposed to be on YouTube. You listen to it on YouTube, and if you come across it on OB Fitness, listen to it. And if it's a case that you have any questions, you feel like you want to ask, feel free to leave a comment underneath the video. Zane, I think what it is I'm going to try and do next week is talk a bit about website and incorporating the website into your whole entrepreneurship journey as it is right now. And I think this is relevant today, especially with, as I've mentioned earlier, about the whole reality of social media. I see where enough users are on social media in the Caribbean, but not many of them really have ownership over their their content, or whether it be their products, that kind of a thing. And I think many people should be exposed, in my view, to certain kind of opportunities. So, I think I have access to someone who more than likely is a website creator. But before I talk about it within that context, it's about obviously presenting to people the options without the high barrier of pricing or cost of a website. Things like Shopify and those kind of things versus you starting a website. Pros and cons. Probably that's something I'm going to talk about next week. All right. So yeah, enough thanks. Enough thanks. Big up on yourself. Big up on yourself.